Good evening to all of you around the world who've come to watch the first podcast of the ICG in this particular era. We're glad that you're here, and I'll just introduce myself, and then the other two gentlemen can introduce themselves. I am James Ricks. Been in the church since I actually think I attended a little bit in '65, but since 1966. Baptized somewhere in that time period, 66, or was it 67? But it was around that turn of that part of the year. Been in the church many, many years, and had a lot of, and I've been blessed to be able to attend Ambassador College and work with Garner Ted Armstrong. So I feel really blessed to share as much as we can, and happy to be here.
I'm Kelly Pearson. With that,
I just thought I'd play that starting out so people can see what we look like 10 years ago. We're a lot younger, a lot less white, and I was a lot thinner, so things changed in 10 years. So I want to welcome everyone to episode 475 of Line Upon Line. If you missed us last week, it's because you don't have Facebook, or you didn't check the Line Upon Line website, because we got banned for 7 days. So
no.
We're back. We're back. We're live, and we're still at it. So episode 475. Let me bring that. The End Times Financial Trap being built to serve the beast. Hopefully this one doesn't get us pulled. Dr. Ricks, if you'd start us out, that'd be great.
Okay. First, I want to thank Gary Johnson, because he's passed away posthumously, and Ken Hardbarger. At a meeting we had, a regional church meeting, it was their idea to do the podcast. I want to thank you all. And you want to give them a few of the numbers, Ken, about how much info we've pushed out in that decade?
Well, in the last 10 years, we've pushed out, we got 73,039 views. We've served almost 25,000 hours. And that's us in 10 years. So, and it's ramped up recently. Our number one program was Josiah. It happened to coincide with some country music song that came out, so everybody was hitting that one.
Looking for Josiah. By the name of Josiah. Very nice.
Over 3,000 views, right?
Yeah, that one got over 3,000, and we also had one. They seem to like our Valentine's.
That's an interesting topic. That might be something people haven't heard before.
Yeah. It's episode 136, Valentine's Day, over 2,000 views.
Oh, that's interesting. I would not have expected it. Didn't we also get when we first started, an early number on the land Sabbath that surprised us? When we first started, that was a topic that we were shocked it got as much attention as it did. But maybe my memory...
No, it was, but it's fallen out because of all the other...
Okay, that's right. But sometimes you never know what people will flock to.
That is a true statement right there. You never know what people like. Sometimes you just, even like when you do a sermon or something, it's sometimes you think, oh, that was awful, and then people will come up, oh man, I really appreciated it. You just never know what someone gets out of a sermon or out of a message or out of a, podcast. Benefits them for that time, for that moment in their life or whatever, for some reason.
Okay. I'll just mention a few jokes to make it quick.
All right, we're back to groaners. All right, the return to groaners.
Okay, so we're going to talk about money. The safest way to double your money is to fold it up and put it back in your pocket.
I actually like that one.
That's good.
Whenever anybody advertises, Everybody is going to lose their money except the guys that are joining my program. You'll double your money.
He can put it in his pocket.
They know how to scare people. A woman was considering a facelift. Her and her husband were discussing it, and they were both saying, it's really expensive. He said, but I want to do it. He said, well, maybe we're spending the money, but she said, well, what if we spend all that money in a facelift, and then in, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, I kick the bucket? Then what are you going to do? The husband thinks. He ponders for a moment, and then he says, well, I guess we'll have to have an open casket. I'll just make this last one. I'm shortening up a few. I'm not going to tell. This one, a 91-year-old woman goes to the beautician and she reshapes her hair and does a whole lot of good stuff on it. She says, you look 10 years younger. The lady is mad. She says, who wants to look 81?
That's funny.
The end times financial trap. The first thing I want to say is, people have speculated for years, how is the beast going to keep you from buying and selling pretty much globally, or maybe a few exceptions, but pretty much globally? How can that be done? Well, I think we now see a possibility. People are talking about central bank digital control, CBDC, that's what they call it, where we live in a cashless society, and it's like a grid. All your money is on a computer grid. I'm sure they use good accounting practices, but it's still, and the government has the power to search your account, to freeze your account.
Just like Canada did with the truckers last year.
Yep.
And that was a regular bank account they were shutting down. It'd have been much easier if it was all digital.
Yeah.
It's the golden rule.
And if there's no cash,
the rules.
Yeah. And with cash, you can get around it by hoarding cash, spending cash on, cash has value. But if they outlaw the use of cash, and businesses won't take cash, wow, they can control everything.
Oh yeah, in France, it is illegal to pay for anything in cash over $1,000.
Yeah.
So if it was 5,000, then it got knocked down to 3,000. Now it's 1,000. You can't, and if you do get caught, you will get fined and put in.
Wow.
By the way, I'm told that's the entire EU. That's what I read. Think about that.
Yep, and then next time it'll be $500, and then $300. That's how they're working it down to nothing.
It depends on how expensive everything gets, though, Ken. You got to at least be able to get a hamburger, even in France, even if it's mutton.
My daughter said, "Hey, can you pay your fine in cash if you get the 1,000?" That's a good one.
It's amazing how I guess maybe even 25 years ago, it got to where you could not travel anymore with cash. There was a day when you could go to the airport with cash, buy a ticket. You could get a rental car with cash, but then there came a day when you could not do either of those unless you had a credit card. And of course, now we've come a long way since then, where we are today. And now I can see this next step into the digital age being something that'll be an easy transition for people that are accustomed to not, dealing in cash.
Now, I may not get the location right, but I think it was Baltimore Washington Airport or Atlanta Airport. It could have been St. Louis, maybe Dallas. I wanted to buy a burger and something really inexpensive. And they said, no, this is a little food store. I'm talking about a big merchandise. We don't take cash in this airport. What?
Well, there is a, I guess I could see the point of dealing in cash because there is the tendency for theft, and the risk of theft when you're dealing in cash. And some employee could say they gave you a service and they give you cash and then they walk out with the cash and they don't ring it up. That would be a problem that is eliminated by credit cards, or debit cards. But in a cashless society, that they pretty much eliminate that idea. You suppose that if they do, I was thinking about this earlier, if they do go to a digital currency, do you suppose there will be an black market sort of a, use of cash anyway, as a barter system?
I doubt there'll be a use of any country's cash. There will be a cash substitute, which will be bartering.
Yeah.
Possibly old silver coins that are 90% silver. I don't know.
Yeah.
There has to be an easy medium of exchange, something that's easily exchangeable and transportable and whatever it is that everybody can agree on to use together. I mean, that's essentially what cash or like a currency issued by a government is in the first place, is the concentration of everybody's confidence that they can redeem that for whatever good they need in exchange for their services, et cetera, something that everybody.
Well, when they put down the regime of the Gaddafi, was it Gaddafi or who was it? Some of the monies that in these countries that have fallen because of war, people began hoarding some of these currencies because they thought it would be reestablished at some point in time, and so they used it and there were even people that bought it and traded it, and in hopes of someday it would come back and it would be worth, million times what they bought it for. And I was just curious if you guys thought that might happen with the U.S. dollar or with any currency if digital currency were to come into full sway.
I don't think it would, especially I just don't, because the dollar, dollar is the same as, it's a measurement, like gallon, like foot, like pound, but it doesn't represent a dollar of anything. It used to be a dollar of silver, which was an ounce. Now it's a dollar of nothing. I mean, it's literally worth a dollar of nothing. So I don't think it would. I think people will be using it to start their fireplace with. I don't know.
It is interesting that something like the dollar, if you read about a lot of these Central and South American countries, even if they have their own currency, it kind of exists side by side, or the value of their native currency is pegged to the dollar at something like 2 to 1. And it's kind of a I don't know, it's confidence. It's a sign of confidence in that economy, and that even if that government can't issue anything that people can believe in and trust to exchange for their goods to facilitate that mode of life, that, what the United States was doing is in fact good enough. Here in Texas, obviously we have a lot of crossover. I've worked in a restaurant and stuff, and there are plenty of Hispanic people or Mexicans and folks that come across the border to work and send monies back to their family. They send cash. There's a huge cash market south of the border, all through Central America and into South America. There's enormous, probably that's an interesting note, I think, on some of what was said earlier. Like, if you buy these currencies, with the confidence that it's going to come back, well, maybe it doesn't. But if you have dollar bills from some bygone era, from the Confederacy or from the Weimar Republic or some ancient stuff in anywhere around Europe or anything like that, at this point in time, it has historical value. It has numismatic value. So those people, if they did bet on that and they kept it around, they probably did make out like bandits in the in the end. It's a limited production.
Well,
one cash, you can sell it to a museum, even if you're hungry.
One interesting thing about the dollar, about half of the dollars are kept overseas. They back up foreign currencies, and you can use, like you said, Michael, you can use dollars in hotels all around the world to buy stuff. But here's the trend. In the last few months, and I may get the BRIC is part of the group that's doing it, but it's mostly Russia, China, Iran, Brazil, and now Saudi Arabia as well, are deciding to no longer trade things like oil and dollars, because dollar was always the measurement by which you traded it, and you exchanged it, and it was kind of like a measuring stick. They're now using the yuan and a basket of currencies that would include the rupee, the ruble. Now, experts say the dollar is safe for the moment because there is no well-established, trusted alternative. Even if we start inflating the dollar too much, it'll probably hang on. But they say regional areas like China and Russia and maybe other places, there's still big countries, might go to these other currencies, and that's not good for America.
Well,
But
you mentioned the confidence, the confidence in our dollar. And if with the ability to portray globally that we're $31 trillion in debt, the biggest debtor nation ever, and the confidence in our dollars begins to cease worldwide, then it could be devastating on the United States.
I don't think anything's going to happen right away, but in the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, timing is hard to know. That's more in the spirit world's hands, I think. But I see a definite downward trend of lack of confidence. And if your debt is much, much bigger than your GDP for that year, that's considered a bad thing. Well, we're in that area. Well, I guess we shall see.
We're past that area. Yeah,
but,
we've if these dollars start coming back from the nations throughout the world, we're going to see inflation like you couldn't imagine.
Yeah. Now, the Fed is committed to fighting inflation by higher interest rates, and I guess we'll see how that works. I just want to mention this real briefly before we read the first scripture. Mussolini and Hitler called their little empire the Holy Roman Empire, and fascism is a form of socialism, communism, but they use big business to enforce many of the rules. And of course, big business controls money, credit, banking. So you see the connection there between fascism. Well, if some future fascist dictator comes along with the help of big business and big banks and central bank digital currency, let's read Revelation 13:16, Ken. Here is what we now see they could easily do. Now, I realize that opens up to a whole ton of speculation, but generally, when you say hand, that means your work and your productivity. That's one way to look at it. And your brain is what you think. So it's like this mark of the beast is going to affect your economic productivity and what you think and believe. Now, exactly how, but can't you see that if they control the central bank, and maybe it controls lesser central banks around the world, and everybody's using this one currency called a mark with the beast picture on it. And I don't know how it will work, but can you see that if you don't do something they want you to do, they cancel your account?
I think their ability to exclude you individually is very important, because we've talked about cash and some other mediums of exchange and things like that. But notice, even if you go to a place like Walmart here in small town Tyler, Texas, USA, as you walk in, they photograph you. As you go to the checkout, there's a camera on your face the entire time. No matter what you're paying with, they know who you are. They've identified you as being in there. You are you. If you live in this country, if you drive a car, if you have a credit card, if you're paying for it, even if you're using cash, I mean, all of those bills have unique numbers on them for a reason. It's not much of a stretch along the same lines that we've been talking about earlier to identify where each and every one of those has been through its entire lifetime. Every time it passed through some cooperating retailer, such as your friendly neighborhood Walmart or CVS or whatever brand name store on the corner that everybody goes to, gas station, whatever it may be. Like there's tabs on all that. They have the ability to identify you, where you're going, where you have been, and you're helping them. If your phone location is on, they know it's you.
Even if
it's interesting
Even if
that
it's
you
off.
mentioned. It's interesting that you mentioned that about like going into Walmart. When you first went in there and started using these devices, you had to put in your number or whatever, your card identify. Now you've been in there so many times, they know that you're a good customer, and they don't even. It goes through without having to enter any bank card number or anything to verify who you are, because obviously the connection between your card, your facial recognition, and your habits. You're in the right store at the right place, at the right time, and so they pass it through without identification. One of the things I wanted to mention, though, is the scripture we just read here. He says all people, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond. And that sort of, you said something about being able to identify you on an individual basis, but I believe it also too means giant corporations. They will make corporations fall in line as well as individuals. If they get out of line, or a big giant company decides they're going to, disregard the big, the green initiative or whatever, they can blackball them or ban them from being able to make any kind of transactions, which is the death of any business or an individual as well.
I have a question. The beast is over the 10 kings, the new Holy Roman Empire that gets rebuilt. When does that jump to global?
My opinion is, I don't really know. Rome ruled the world, but the civilized world of ancient times for many, many centuries. Not the whole world, but if you left out China and a few places in India, they pretty much ruled the whole civilized world of any sort in those days. But Rome wasn't everywhere, but the power of the Roman Empire was. So I think there'll be a Holy Roman Empire and a bunch of 10 kingdoms in Europe, but they still will have influence over most of the rest of the world that's worth having control over. There might be a few way out islands, jungle spots, but nothing of any significance. I think with computers, digital currency, smartphones, recognition, China is doing now with software, facial recognition. You can control people if you got the. By the way, in the ancient days, there was a time when everyone had to go. I think Nero may have started it, but somewhere in the Roman Empire, you had to go once a year and do some little thing to show you were recognizing that he was the emperor, he was godlike, or some little incense you burned. They gave you a certificate. Christians wouldn't do it, and so they got some persecution behind it. What if they did something like that in the future? Maybe you had to go to certain church places where they did certain worship of the beast. You had to renew your card once a year or else. I mean, wouldn't that be very possible?
Well, yeah, especially if they hold the only accepted global currency and they could control its movement. I mean, that would probably make it become global because no one else would have anything. If you wanted to eat, you got to use their currency.
How about how tangled all of the finances of the most developed world are? I think that's an interesting perspective. You talk about like a concentrated group controlling the entire world, but then compare that to the UN Security Council or the G7 or something like that of the moneyed nations who are really controlling what can or can't go before public opinion, not really public opinion, but a vote before the whole assembly, which makes the whole assembly a sham in the end. But it just illustrates that there is a limited number of power players that are participating. At this point in time, though, what happens to China without America, or vice versa, right? Like, we buy a lot of their goods, they make a lot of goods, they need to sell goods. Europe is doing an interesting thing by severing itself from Russia, I guess, however true that is, or if they're going to keep that relationship afloat or turn back that way, I don't really know. But for the moment, everything's pretty tangled up, wouldn't you think, between the United States and Europe, and not only that, but extending into the third world through, I don't know, loans and things that are carried on balance sheets as assets. That's when everything really starts to bleed and fall apart, is when you've been treasuring something as if it were gold and it turns out to be nothing. Nothing at all.
Yeah, I get your point. And these people don't want any of that to happen. The people running the show. I've often thought, especially more recently, I think this whole collapse is going to be controlled. They don't want chaos.
But how can our enemies extricate themselves before that happens, and also push it to happen at the same point in time? And so the BRICS thing with Brazil and China and, you know, Saudi Arabia pivoting away from the dollar. Oh my goodness, that seems like a really big deal. And, you know, Russia's relationship with Europe also. But if they can get away from us and then let us go down, that would be ideal from their point of view, wouldn't it? Because you keep yourself safe and you get rid of your enemy by your very exit.
I could see potentially like Macron's in China now. I don't know all, but apparently they're buying a certain percentage of something and not using the dollar. That's Macron of France. Shocking to everybody. France is Britain's number one. France is our number two ally. I can see the day, one, I don't think they trust American leadership anymore. I mean, it's lost a lot of credibility. But I can see the day when Britain has the pound, America has the dollar, and Europe has the great new mark currency that's a digital, it's the winner. And then they could try their best to undermine the dollar and the pound. I guess we shall see, but I can see Europe turning against America someday.
You know, we might find ourselves in the same boat as third world countries that had to be submissive to the United States for the last 200 years. You know, the United States made the rules. They had to follow the rules. They had to stay in line. They had to do, you know, the trade. They had to agree to all the policies, you know, international policies, whatever it was. We, the United States, may find ourselves in that situation, as a sort of a third world country, as just as an analogy, but maybe as a real third world country compared to the power of global economy, that we're not in the driver's seat anymore.
Well, can I take a minute, Dr. Ricks? I want to just, seeing as how we're about halfway through the program, I want to let everybody know what happened who didn't see us last week. We got a takedown from our overlords here that didn't like something that was said on the program over a year ago, and they took the program down and banned us for a full 7 days. Fine, I contested it. They said sorry, you still can't get back and go live. So last week's program is up because I still did it on another channel, and I uploaded it, and then obviously we're going out live this week. But if you don't, if in the future, all they got to do is find something wrong with one of the 474 programs that are left at any given time they want, and send their algos out to search through them, and boom, we're done forever. Two more check marks, and we're done.
Free strike, you're out.
So go use lulicg.org. lulicg.org. That's where everything that happens here will be posted. Plus, if you're on Facebook, there's a Line Upon Line page. That's also where I post stuff. But we will have to, if we have to, we will jump to Rumble and live stream from there. So far, there's no issue with that, and I just I don't like the idea of having to move there because a lot of people find us here. I like that, and if something happens to Rumble, then we'll just set a server up in here and we'll just feed it right out of here. I don't mind. But that's what happened last week if you were looking for us. And from now on, just kind of keep up with things and use that website as where we communicate our location just in case this happens again. We'll stay here until we're done.
Want to repeat that address one more time?
lulicg.org.
See, also, Ken's can-do attitude is what keeps this thing banging after 10 years. There you go, Ken.
Yeah.
Well, they ended. We were using Google. Oh, what was the name of that?
Oh, Hangouts? Was it called
Hangouts. We were using
Yeah.
Hangouts for years, and Google dumped Hangouts, and
Google doesn't want you hanging out anymore.
yeah, they don't want us hanging out anymore. So then we went straight to live streaming to YouTube through the software. And if we have to do something else, we will. Also, I want to thank a few people. The intro that you see, that is the audio is Dan Phelps, who goes to the feast site down in Panama City, and goes to church with us up in Michigan. So he wrote that. Me and him worked on that. I didn't do anything other than telling what I was looking for, and he gave us that. And my daughter did the video. That goes with the intro, the puzzle pieces that puts the Bible together. And then Christina Pryor put together all the visuals you see, the current intro, the old intro, and all the slides that we use, the backgrounds are all hers. So I want to thank those people for helping us out. Obviously, everybody that's always on the program, but that's what those people were a big part of what all the effects and videos and our theme, what we look like, is all Christina's work. So just wanted to thank those. Now we can go back to the gloom and doom of the global financial system.
Okay, yes. By the way, there's several trends we're going to go into in the next few minutes that are going to create, well, I'm using the words of certain people, a financial tsunami that are going to create great economic woes, and it's coming toward the world. Some are starting to hit now, but it will get worse. Someday, a political and, I believe, financial savior will come out of Europe to save the world. And of course, it will look like he's a lamb, a wonderful guy, but actually, God says he's really going to be a beast, but in sheep's clothing. Would you read Revelation 13:11, please, Kenny?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Test. There I am. Yeah. Nobody hollered at me and said they couldn't hear me the last time. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Did I read the right one?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, I believe that's the right one. Yeah, he's going to. So a collapse is coming. Digital money is convenient, so I understand why they're going to want to use it. Digital money is very convenient, but there's a suddenness to what's going to happen. Why don't we play Matthew 24:38? Then I want to talk about the timing issue, because I think that's something that could be confusing, the timing issue.
Did you say Matthew?
24:38.
For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came, took them away. So also will be the coming of the Son of Man be. She didn't show up.
If we apply that to the financial issue, and you could go back to 1929, the stock market crash. People were partying. They called it the Roaring '20s. People had no idea that all that over-leveraged debt, and I won't go into all the other issues that were involved, but that was the biggest one, over-leveraged debt, too much debt. And when it collapsed, it was sudden. It caught the world by surprise. And it was most devastating to Germany's economy and America's economy. And that indirectly led to Hitler coming to power in Germany. His party was a very minor party until, well, the horrible things that happened to the German economy. My point is, it's going to happen someday. All these bad things are going to build up. I'll call it a bubble of debt and other bad, sound economic issues. We'll go into a few in a minute. When that bubble bursts, someone will have to come on the scene and save the world, and it'll be the beast. But here's the thing that's tricky. I believe, and we have a scripture we referenced near the end of the program. It's a spiritual thing. God is blocking the devil from doing all of his works right now. When God removes the block, it'll happen. But we don't know when God's going to do that. So here's what could happen or might happen. Let's say the collapse is 9 or 10 years away. I mean, the bubble really bursting. We might have a minor burst like 2008, 2009, banking crisis. The economy goes into a recession. We sort of climb back out. 3 or 4 or 5 years later, we have another minor banking crisis. Each one, I think America gets weaker and the dollar gets weaker and our other things get weaker. But we kind of climb out of it. And then one day, the big burst happens. But since we can't know when that date is, I think it'd be wrong for people to do anything like, I'm getting my money out of the banks, I'm putting my cash in a mattress. I'm going to do a run on the bank. Or I'm not going to save for retirement or for my grandkids, whatever you're saving up for, so you can buy them a car or a new business, whatever you want. I think you don't want to, a lot of people that are on television and in radio, and both in and out of the ministry, some are financial gurus, they live on panic and fear. And we don't want to be motivated by that. We're going to give some investment advice near the end of the program, but, let's admit it. Since if you want specific investment advice for your specific situation, there are people who are certified by various states who supposedly studied the stock market, and they know various insurance plans and retirement programs, and go to one of those. We're not trying to pretend to be an investment advisor, but I just think we got to be careful not to panic because we do not know the date.
The Silicon Valley collapse bank, it was really like a microcosm of something bigger to come, and what's different about that though is, they bailed out those depositors because they were like 80 or 90% of them were over, $1 million in holders there at that bank. But there's going to come a time when there are a wider array of bank collapses, but the insurance, the FDIC won't be able to bail them all out. And that could be, a time when that could be very devastating. I mean, it could be one of those triggers that would cause people to think, well, it's over with. Our banking system is over with here in our country, and widespread panic could set in very, very quickly, and that could happen within a few days. I like your point about what happened in Germany. It's interesting that after 1929, after the Great Depression, as they called it, it was just shortly thereafter that I think it was 1933 that Hitler came to power, and immediately he began to formulate the secret, Gestapo, and he he killed all of his in what was it, the Night of Long Knives, where he killed all of his opposition. So he grabbed power at that particular moment, and we could see that as a result arising out of the ashes of a meltdown here in the United States, financial meltdown, a grab for power by someone who is able to pull it off.
What bothers me is we have big corporations cooperating with the government, I think, in brainwashing people and suppressing truth, and that's a little National Socialist-like.
It's another interesting point too, is, just another thought came to me that, the reparations that were made against Germany at that time was devastating. they were going to have to make payments of reparations because of World War I for the next 50 something years. So they were, they were in terrible straits. They were in terrible debt for the foreseeable future. And so out of that, they were, that power, it was the perfect ingredients for a dictator to rise up and give people the political answers and the financial security for the future.
That Dr. Riggs put a line similar to that in the notes. The financially frightened will trade freedom for security. When things start to go wrong, people want everything to be okay again. And in the scriptures about the beast, like who is like him, who can make war with him? If he's got a stable system and security by nobody being able to approach him or make war with him, that's going to be appealing to a large number of people who will go along with it willingly because they want things back. They want the comforts and the worry off of them. They don't care what it costs to get there, what they have to sacrifice in freedom, if you will. They just want that.
I was reading that scripture in Revelation, the 13th chapter, where it says, no one buy or sell except who has the mark or the name or the number of his name. And I was sort of speculating here a while before the program. I wonder what that means. It's not all of them. It's one or the other or the other. It's the mark, the name, or the number of the name. And I was wondering if that possibly could be, and this is what I wrote here, total acceptance, which would be someone who has the mark, total acceptance of the whole system, the monetary system, digital monetary system, whatever it might be in the future. Secondly, the name, could that possibly be those who are employed by the state or the government of the beast? And finally, the number of the name, would that be possibly special permits given only to those who requested them, to temporarily, be able to trade and to move about within that system? Just speculation on my part, but you can see how they're obviously they're going to have to be someone who oversees this and employees and people that are taking care of it. And it would be just like special privilege with it under the Third Reich. If you were, if you were German and you were Hitler's friend and you had high status within that society, you could move about freely. Otherwise, you're a prisoner of it.
Sort of like a special code. You got the code number, N55Z78, and that automatically puts you privileged in the algorithm of the system. Yeah, I could see that.
Or an account
a secret
number.
Code that goes with him.
Or tied to an account number of some sort.
Yeah, and I know 666 has to do with, I think Roman and Greek. Some of the letters are both letters and numerical. They do both. Mm-hmm. And so the people play with names, but we can worry about that later. But the one thing that I've got a little article about all the horrible credit card debt Americans have run up, because 2/3 of Americans are living hand to mouth, and you really should try to save 2 or 3% every month if you can. That was one of the reasons for the economic collapse. But get out of debt. These debts that you don't need. I may need to have car payments, house payments, but you know what I mean. Credit card debt is just like playing with a loan shark. Anyway, let's go to Romans 13:8.
Owe no one anything except to love one another, for he who loves one another has fulfilled the law.
And I think it's immoral. The Bible implies it in several other places to run up debts that you have no intent in paying. You have no intention of paying.
That happened in the housing bubble,
people would get them and then refinance them and just hope for the best. I think charging exorbitant amounts of interest, I believe that's highly immoral. Paycheck loans, those types of things that prey on people that are in vulnerable situations, with some asset that they can hand over and seize afterwards, the kind of interest that you end up paying on that. If you don't know any better, you should look that kind of stuff up. How much you end up paying back in the aggregate over if you were able to sustain it over the lifetime of that loan. Do the math on that. It'll blow your mind how much you're going to pay back.
Oh, I watched a bit. What's that guy who does financial advice on the radio? Oh,
Dave Ramsey.
Ramsey.
No, not Ramsey.
All right, that's my only guess.
No, it wasn't Ramsey. The guy, he's had a show for 15, 20 years on the radio. Gets people out of debt. Tells them. Anyway, somebody called his radio program. And this woman, her and her husband were like $350,000 in debt, not counting the house. That was credit cards, student loans. It might have been more than that. And a car loan. $350,000. How do you do that? Ramsey couldn't even speak. Not Ramsey, but whoever the guy's name, he couldn't even speak. I mean, he was done. I mean, maybe it is Ramsey. I don't remember. But he couldn't even. He was dumbfounded that anybody could get themselves into that much trouble, and it was crazy.
I believe that you brought up, and I was about to say that student loans. I think it's a criminal act what they have done to the young people and getting them into, between $50,000 and $200,000 in debt before they ever step out and earn their first paycheck. I think it's criminal what they do. I mean, once they realized that they could put these people on these credit lines for, so many years after they get out of college, the price of college expense went through the roof. It went through the roof because now people could charge to go to college, and that I think was a terrible tragedy. I think the credit card debt now is between $6,000 and $9,000 per person in the United States, per person, and it's and one thing I found out recently too is that older people are in over their heads as well. Even though they're close to being on a fixed income, they have a tendency to buy things that they never could afford when they were young. And they're older now. They got a bigger income. They're more stable. But they, too, are some of the largest debt holders when it comes to credit cards. And I thought that was shocking. It was shocking to me. I didn't know that. Terrible.
Makes people more vulnerable. But another factor in the debt cycle, well, let's say the financial problem, is the birth rate bomb. You might have heard Elon Musk talk about it. But the birth rate bomb is where you have a large, what we call the baby boomers and other bulges in the population demographics. But the people 20 years behind them who have to pay in the Social Security to support this millions that are retiring is shrinking. But originally, when FDR passed Social Security, most people died about 66, 67. They got a year or two in, and there are a lot of babies around. It was not even a problem. Well, now, and it's even worse in some countries like Japan, even China has a problem with it. There are not enough young workers to support a vast number of people who are going to retire. That's even one of the reasons they're rioting in France. I mean, he's trying to adjust it.
He just passed the law today. I think he passed the law today, wasn't? Or was it yesterday that they're going to try to push it through that retirement age goes from 64 to 66, I think it is. They're protesting over it.
Yeah. I think it was a little lower. I think it's like 63 to 60 or 62 to 4 or something like that. It was.
I think.
Maybe it was.
Yeah, I feel like it was still younger than the United States, but folks are mad. I mean,
I understand why they're mad, but the truth is, if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. There aren't enough young workers, and it's almost like I'm giving an opinion, but I'm sure that everyone would agree with this. Diminishing family values is one reason for the birth rate bomb. that's hit the world. What's one of the core purposes of marriage and family? It's reproduction. I mean, no one would just, and that's why marriage is important. And by the way, kids who don't come from a two-parent home are much more likely to have problems like crime. You probably know some of the stats. My thing is, this birth rate bomb and the undermining of family values like a dagger at the economies of most fairly prosperous nations. It's a devilish thing. And then when you throw in stuff like abortion, which is just another factor in it, you know, America could have, what, 30 or 40 million additional workers now if it weren't for aborted babies.
Yeah,
And
and
it would be legal Americans.
You know, I think it's Japan is having that, you know, the same problem with the shrinking. I mean, really at over the next 25 to 30, 40 years. But I forget now, it's like 25 million people. I mean, it's a huge number. But you take some of these smaller countries too that have less you know, that maybe only have 10, 15 million people. They can't stand, their populations are dropping by 10%. Can you imagine losing 10% of your population for a country? What that would do to the taxing entity, that is devastating. Those people are going to be, they got some real problems they're going to have to face in the future when it comes to losing 10% of their income for, you know, all of their, you know, services and government. That, you know, I can see that being a real problem. It's going to cause the country to go to a lot lower standard of living. That's for sure.
Hence the retirement age in France going up a few years.
He kicked the can down the road. He sure did.
But one thing is, currency is supposed to represent productivity of the economy. Well, if you have less young workers, because once you retire, you're no longer productive. And I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying, once you have less young workers, you have less productivity. Your economy and your currency is by definition weaker. And you can't pay for the stuff that you might have promised these people, all this wonderful stuff, when you thought the birth rate was going to stay normal. But the anti-family stuff has just destroyed family life in much of the world.
Yeah. Population growth is automatic growth to the overall economy. Every baby, every child growing up needs a multitude of expensive goods, and therefore, you know, the wheels keep turning. And it makes you wonder about immigration, why there's no real appetite to solve it in this country, save for a select few, maybe. And what Europe did, you know, back in 2015 or so, their migrant crisis, you know, they did ask for it in the first place. They're faced with that problem as well. And if they can bring large numbers of people in who maybe even aren't entirely attuned to their, oh, I'm not going to have kids, I'm just going to worry about me and have fun until I'm a late adult and it's really too late and it's hard to do that kind of stuff by now thing. They bring, you know, population rich, you know, the only places in the world where the population is growing, you know, you look at Africa, you look at Indonesia, you look at a lot of nations like that. And that's where folks come from to flock to these other nations. Well, for a generation or two, they're going to still be prone to having large families, et cetera, that props up these failing systems like ours, like Europe's.
You know, we in the oil and gas industry, I was just thinking about that. We have an industry that is based upon global markets. And unlike a lot of markets, I'll give you an instance, like the price of oil. We can be going along here at the price of oil at $80 a barrel. Everything is good. The economy is good in our industry. Everybody's making money. The workers are all working. All the service companies are working. And then we can have a immediate drop to $40 a barrel in our industry. Now, that doesn't happen in a lot of industries, but our industry, it can happen. And all of a sudden, the everything dries up. I mean, all of the service people dry up. They lay off people. I mean, it can happen very quickly. I guess sort of an example of what can happen to a shrinking population. You know, it can happen, you know, rather quickly for a country over just a few years to lose that base. You're losing it's like your base income, you know, and you don't. forget the overtime. You're barely making it on minimum wage then.
Yeah, this
Now,
none of this is
the
by
opposite of
accident,
that.
though.
Oh, I was going to say the opposite of that. Like, for instance, when everybody was coming out of all these lockdowns and things like that, wasn't there the reverse effect where everybody in the industry suddenly needed labor and they needed services and they needed all these things, but everybody had already found something else to do. And so for a while, there's a huge shortage that ends up complicating bringing that back online.
Some of it's our government's fault. They have changed the unemployment laws to make it more satisfactory to not work. Or you work a few months and you drop out of the market. I can't explain it, but I'm told by employers that people have found they can get by without working. So if the job is not a good paying job, pleasant job, in other words, our government, the current, is undermining the work ethic of the American worker, which is not good for the economy.
Well, as a result of that, people working at home, one of the industries that's really took a hit is the commercial real estate market. I mean, they are really in trouble because companies have found out, hey, I can have my people work at home. We don't need to have this big luxurious office building with 50 office rooms in it. So now these banks are hanging on to all of these loans for commercial real estate. And they don't even know if some of these commercial real estate companies are going to be able to pay the loans, pay the debt that they owe, and that's going to create another big problem in the financial market.
I would blame COVID on Satan. I know China did it, but it makes you wonder if he didn't see all this coming. Ken, would you read the next two verses, please?
Sure.
Somebody we associate with the dragon.
Yeah. None of this population is reducing the population. It's not accidental. Everything they are doing is to push it down. If you think about all the movements in the gay and the trans and all that, those people are not going to have children. I mean, once you start taking all those drugs and getting things cut off and this, that, and the other thing, you're not going to have kids.
Puts a damper on reproduction.
It does a little bit, but more than that, I'm sure. But I mean, the whole push is to less people. I mean, in Canada, you can walk into what's the equivalent of a department store and have yourself suicided on a Saturday afternoon just on a whim. You don't need any.
They call that therapy, Ken. You got to use the right words. We already got one strike.
Yeah, therapy. There we go.
It's a therapy.
Yeah, it's kind of a permanent therapy that they do. Yeah. And in a lot of states in this country, people don't know it. It's legal in a lot of states in this country. And it's not accidental. The left sees conservatives see every newborn person, every new life as a blessing from God. A gift, and that can make the world a better place with more production, more invention, more innovation, human capital. The left sees every new human being as a burden to society, and that's where we're at. All right. Children are the crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. And then Psalms 127, like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate.
But in one sense, it's really
blessed
true.
And happy is the man. It's on that. Blessed
exactly.
Yeah, it's a jam. Way to go, Dwight.
Your kids may be a burden to you when they're 14, but when they become adults, they're good for the economy. The next section I want to go into is inflation, famine are coming to destroy the world. Maybe the details of how it unravels, we'll have to guess. But we might pass over Deuteronomy 15:5. God is going to bless a country that obeys him and not bless a country that doesn't obey him. We kind of know that. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28:43.
The alien who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. He shall lend to you, but you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, and you shall be the tail.
It just makes you wonder. You see things where there are companies from overseas that have big businesses in America, and they own a lot of our, at least a chunk of our national debt. And the more wild spending we do, can you see, and irresponsible business practices and stupid stuff, can you see that God not blessing us and letting our finances be run by foreigners?
If we fail financially, a whole new set of rules are going to be extended over our nation by those who are in charge of the money. I mean, if we fail and they have a strong economy and they have a strong financial system and we collapse or we go bankrupt as a nation, we're going to see a whole new set of rules imposed upon us, and we're not going to like it because we're used to being free. Maybe that's a little blunt. I shouldn't say it like that.
Well, that's like somebody mentioned something like that earlier, how the United States has been making the rules for a long time, and there are those out there who no doubt resent that. And as soon as there's a chance to dethrone us, if you will, and make us play by their rules that are maybe more beneficial for them, that prop up the value of their currency, and that ends up equaling great wealth, at least in the short term, that's they're going to do it. If they can, they're going to do it. When this goes down, it's somebody's taking a pound of flesh.
Well, in Daniel, the 7th chapter, it says that the beast power is describing that. He says he's going to think to change times and laws. That's harsh to think that you're going to be under the edicts of a dictator who maybe doesn't believe in God, number one, doesn't believe your country should even exist anymore as a nation, and that you should be subservient to whatever he decides is law. And it's going to, that could be anything from religious observance to, the way you conduct business or what you work for, and however much your income of the day or week or months or year belongs to him.
Good. Ken, would you read the NIV scripture? It's Revelation 6:5. I may have left the RVV off. Sorry.
When the Lamb opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked, and there before me was a black horse. Its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. Then I heard what sounded like a voice among the 4 living creatures, saying, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, and 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, and do not damage the oil and the wine.
In other words, of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, how all that plays out in the end, we can only guess. But there will come, it's going to be deception, war, and then horrible shortages of food with unbelievable inflation. Actually, that did happen in the Weimar Republic, where it took a wheelbarrow full of currency to get a wheelbarrow full of bread. Or crazy things like that. A day's wages to just get a little barley. You can see and that's coming. I don't know how it will all play out. And then the beast will somehow rescue the world, but we'll be giving up our personal finance. Finances are really a mark of freedom. You can make your own financial decisions. They're going to take a lot of that away from us.
In the Weimar Republic, I believe they were paying the workers every day because inflation was moving daily, hourly. The men would give their wages to their wives over the fence or however they were there. As soon as they got paid, they'd give their wives the money, and they would go buy everything they could with the money, because by tomorrow everything was double.
Yeah.
And we saw that similar thing happen in Venezuela not too many years ago when they were cooking zoo animals for food. So, yeah, it could get really, really ugly.
Well, especially in the United States, where we're, I should say, not just the United States, but in the modern era, we're so interconnected with our food chain, from the time it leaves the garden to the farms and it gets to our grocery store, within a day or two, and it's really fresh. All of that, if that all collapses, in 1929 when they had, when the Great Depression occurred, there was a lot of people that starved in the United States, which is hard for people to even imagine. But if you really look, you'll find that there were people that starved to death because there just wasn't any food, and they lived largely on farms and were able to produce their own crops. We today in the United States we're so far away from that, being dependent upon the soil in which we live, upon which little farm that we have, maybe have goats and chickens and cows or whatever in a little garden. We're dependent upon the Walmart grocery store, which could be emptied within just a matter of hours if something like that were to happen.
And those people were much tougher and harder people than we are today.
Yeah.
We're soft as we can be. These people, if they miss two meals, it's the end of the world, you know.
Yep. Let's look at the biblical concepts of wealth for a minute. Matthew 6:19, please, Ken.
Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You cannot serve God and mammon. Therefore I say to you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing?
When you put all that in the context, and Christ said it, he really said you should be more concerned with your spiritual growth. And I really believe this, that most of us, if we're around when the bubble burst and these things coalesce, we'll be going to places of safety where maybe we'll be off the grid. And we'll probably have to have a little tougher life. We'll be able to, have all the delicacies. Well, that's my opinion, that we've got now. It'll be a little tougher, but we'll be safe. But our only protection is really God. I know people say, well, I'm going to get us, and I've met people like this. I can tell you a couple stories, but I'll save you. They got 10 sacks of beans and 5 shotguns, and they're going into the hills of Tennessee off the grid, and they'll be safe. You can only do so much of that. By the way, I'm not against having a little savings, having a little extra food for what I call minor crises that we may have, and I'm getting ready some things too. But overall, it's God as our safety.
Yeah, the more you think about trying to avoid it, the more things you can come up with that you can't. I mean, if you paid all your bills and you had some way to keep things going at your end, you still have taxes to pay. You still have to pay your property tax and things like that. You have to be able to pay. And if you can't buy anything or sell anything, you can't pay taxes. Because that's how everything's going to move electronically. You won't be able to pay it without the mark. So we're going to have to rely on God. There's just no way around it.
And there may be a barter market that you can use to, some things, but I still agree with you, Ken. In the end, God is our protection. So the time to get on God's side is now. Not wait till the bubble bursts and the crisis is here and everybody's screaming, God save me. I'm not saying God won't save people the last second, but that's not a smart strategy.
Yeah, let me qualify what I just said. People shouldn't be looking for a way around having God protect you. My point is this. If you think you're going to be able to do it without God, I got news for you. It ain't going to work. You shouldn't be looking for a way around doing it on your own, but you're going to have to rely on God, and you should want.
I always think about the scripture in Isaiah that it's basically talking about idols. People would put their trust in idols, but it says it's going to come a day when they're going to throw their idols of silver and their idols of gold out into the streets because, it's not going to save them. If they have to be dependent upon God in order for him to save them, Otherwise, and money, gold, silver is not going to save you. It's got to be God, your trust and faith in God that it's eventually going to rescue us. And that's the whole premise of our faith anyway.
I concluded this program with 4 pieces of investment advice. Remember, your individual program, you can go to community advisors. I'm told there's also Christian investment advisors in some states. Search around. I guess it exists, at least in Bible Belt states. Okay, number 1 principle: pray and obey God for safety and sustenance. I still think that's number 1. Number 2, non-emotional investing in diversification. You're going to say, what do I mean by non-emotional? Non-emotional means some guy panics you hear on the radio, I'm going to sell all my stocks or take my money out of the bank. Well, first of all, in investment, you're supposed to buy low and sell high. Well, emotion makes you do the opposite. They frighten you. So when the market is low, I want to sell because it's bad. Or gold is super high, I want to buy because it's up. And I'm not saying I know when to buy and when to get out of the market, when to get in. It's complicated and tricky, but you have to be non-emotional or people will use emotion against you. I mean, that's my opinion. Also, the experts claim diversification, because everything doesn't go down at once, hopefully. Maybe 10 to 15% limit on gold and silver as an investment, but it will never be a currency. They will not allow gold as a currency, but it could be part of your investment package if you want to save for retirement. Number 3, remember timing, we don't know. And I think it's second. Did I put down the scripture 2 Thessalonians 2?
5
8, yeah. Okay, so people read that scripture and you'll see that God is holding Satan back. But at some point, he'll decide when not to hold him back. But we can't see that. But what I would say is if we watch world events, we'll get a better sense of when that bubble is going to burst than the average person would.
I'd like to maybe, one thing I wanted to say during the program, and I didn't get around to doing it, but was the reason that all of this is going to come down is because mankind has really thumbed their nose at God. And these are, all of this that we're talking about is sort of gloom and doom. And it's not my favorite subject to talk about, but it is a result of man's disobedience and disregard of God. And these things are the result, automatic result of man doing that very thing. If God clearly laid it out in Deuteronomy, where he talked the blessings and the cursings, that if you will obey me, all of these blessings, and we read the scripture, you'll lend to countries and you'll never borrow. But man has gone the opposite direction, and these are things that this is not something that God is bringing upon us. It's the result of our own actions as a people, as a nation, as a world, because every man is after his own greed, and they've left God in the background. So these are automatic things that are going to happen to the world, and God is going to let it happen, so that he, proves or shows man that his word was true and was right.
My last and number 4 recommendations is, if possible, I know many people are suffering financially, but if you can, save 2 or 3% every month, have some cash reserves, get out of credit card debt and debt to department stores that have these high interest rates if you don't pay it off right away. Or if you do have credit cards, pay them off every month if at all possible. And then you can also have a little bit of food reserve, canned foods, extra food in the freezer, whatever you can do, because I do think we're going to have some up and down bad moments. I remember there was one winter crisis, and we were somewhere in Maryland, and there were people who didn't have any extra food, and they were making runs on convenience stores, 7-Elevens, high prices, little choices. They couldn't even go a day or two when the supermarkets were closed. And I just think we should have more reserves.
One of the biggest consumed bar foods came out of a crisis.
What food is that?
Buffalo wings. Chicken wings. It was during a blizzard in Buffalo, New York. This bar, all they had left in the bar, because they had ate everything, was wings. You can look this up, and hot sauce. And they deep fried these chicken wings and cut them up, and you put hot sauce on them, and that's what they were eating, and that's what started Buffalo, chicken wings. Serious. Back in the 70s.
Because we all know buffaloes fly.
Yeah, AOC says stop killing the buffalo for the wings.
Did she really say that?
No, but there's memes all over the place that has her saying it. Trust me, they're easy to find. Well, I want to. What else do we got? Anybody have one?
Well, that's the end of the program.
Okay. Well, we want to thank everyone for watching tonight, and thank everyone that helped make this program possible, and especially the people that do watch, because face it, if you guys didn't show up every week, we wouldn't be doing this. So thank you for showing up. Remember, our alternate channel is going to be Buffalo. It's going to be oh no, now I'm out of whack. Rumble, and always check out our Line Upon Line, lulicg.org. That's where we will communicate any changes, and it's also where we communicate all the notes for the program. Usually by Wednesday, I'll have it up there. So we hope you enjoy the rest of your Sabbath, and we'll see you back here again next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
We're happy you could make it, and so glad you are here, and hope that we've been able to make God's word more clear. Until next time, may God be with you in everything you try. But for now, till next week, we have to say goodbye.